morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name's Emma, and I'm the head of demand generation here at Logic.io. We're excited to host you today to discuss unlocking advanced configuration to power manufacturing sales experiences with our customer Lamons. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please direct all of your questions into the Q&A box. If we have time at the end, we'll answer it live or we'll follow up with you individually afterwards. Additionally, there will be a recording of this webinar distributed, so you'll be able to take a look back at any points that you would like to refine. And with that, I would like to introduce David Green, the Senior Vice President of Information Technology from Lamons, and Christopher Schutz, CEO and co-founder of Logic.io. And I'll kick it off to Chris to start.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And thank you, David, for joining us on this webinar. What I'll do is I'll just spend a little bit at the beginning giving you an overview of Logic.io and our technology. Then David will talk about his project with Logic.io and their plans. And then at the very end of the presentation, I'll jump into a demo and show you a real-life example. We'll size a generator and show you what the technology looks like real-time inside SalesForce. So I'll start off talking a little bit about who is Logic.io. So we're a technology company that makes a product called the Commerce Logic Engine. And what that is, that's a place for you as a company to store all of your product rules and recommendations for your products in one place, and then syndicate that functionality out into Salesforce CPQ or potentially an e-commerce experience, or put it on your website as a digital lead gen tool, or put it into a service scenario. And one of the key benefits of Logic is that it's a headless technology, so you can define all of your rules and product recommendations in one place, and then use that throughout the organization and maintain that centrally. So it lightens the maintenance workload that you would have for your product configurator. We also have developed the Commerce Logic Engine at Logic.io to handle a couple of things we're seeing in the marketplace in terms of changes in buyer behavior. And one of the reasons why our technology is differentiated to really help you sell more and sell faster while maintaining less. And one of the first big buyer trends that we see here is that users of technology and buyers in general are getting a lot more particular about the experiences that they have with technology when they're buying products. And some of this is probably driven by, the pandemic and COVID. But what customers are wanting is they're wanting to do self-service wherever they can. When they do that self-service experience, they want it to be very performant. They don't want to wait for like a spinning wheel to update. They don't want to have to hit an update button. They don't want to have to hit a save button. They want it to be very much an Amazon-like experience, the way that they interact and sell products, even for very complex B2B transactions, like some of the products that Lamons sells today to their engineered customers. So that's one big trend that's happening in the market. And the other big trend on the right of this slide is that companies like Lamons, they don't want to sell just bags of parts, so to speak. They want to sell complete solutions to their customers. So not only do an initial sale, let's say for some equipment or hardware, but perhaps they want to do a recommended spare program, or maybe a service program, or even a software subscription that goes with that. And that actually is a really interesting shift in the market. But one of the issues with that is that it does make the configuration experience more complicated to set up and manage, so that you can communicate it very clearly to your customers in a particular selling scenario. And these two trends were kind of the big reasons why we actually started Logic.io a couple of years ago. We knew that we had to create a technology that gave users a next level type experience, an Amazon-like experience with product configuration, but also allowed them to be very flexible, change their products rapidly, and sell a complete portfolio of one-time equipment or products, as well as subscriptions and other things to go with that, and sell a complete solution in the software. And the way that Logic.io works, so the key scenario we're showing you here is for a Salesforce customer. But if you start on the left side of this slide, there's really kind of three major personas that would typically interact with the technology. So one would be an internal user, which would be like a sales rep for your organization. The second would be like a VAR, reseller, a dealer, distributor, a channel partner that could log in through SalesForce or could log in through a dealer portal, for example. And then the third persona that's really popular with this technology is to do an end user. So they would log into or join onto your e-commerce application that you may already have from your corporate website or from a login that they've already registered for in your e-commerce app. So those three scenarios would then interact with the Logic.io configurator. So that blue box here in the middle of the slide. So we really take over the C and CPQ or the CPQ scenario. And we manage all of the product relationships, the bundling, so to speak, what parts go on into the shopping cart or the quote, and what parts would go into the manufacturing bill of material. And then the pricing and the quoting piece of it would be handled with Salesforce CPQ, just like you may be doing today with that product. And while the line items are going onto the quote screen in Salesforce CPQ, we're also creating this logic object down here, which is a bill of material or a provisioning object. And what that does is that stores all the items and provisioning information. Let's say if you're a technology business that you wouldn't necessarily want to show the customer or put on the quote. And in many cases, this bill of material or provisioning data could be thousands of line items of information that's required behind the scenes so that you can fulfill the order, manufacture the product, et cetera. And then this BOM object and quote from CPQ then merge up and then go into your e-commerce system for the CPQ scenario, or it goes through your e-commerce checkout scenario if you're doing a self-service type of a transaction with Logic and Salesforce. So that's a little bit kind of a high-level schematic of how the flow works with the technology. And just to give you an idea what this experience could look like, and I will show you a demo here in a few minutes, but these are a couple of examples with a few of our customers. So one of the exciting things about Logic.io running inside of Salesforce is you can present your product message, your product configuration, your deal configuration, your offer configuration, however you refer to that, in many different ways with different menu options, pictures, some dynamic visual aids inside the configuration, tabs, grouping, as customers are interacting with the various selections they're making inside the configurator. They can see the behavior updating real time, almost like a video game in some cases. And some of the key pieces, if you dive kind of one layer down into the technology, some of the key pieces that are differentiators for us at Logic.io, one of the big things is what we call light speed performance. So when we developed this technology, we knew that we had to increase the user experience by 100x or 1000x to really be successful to support the shifts that I mentioned that are happening in the market. And one of those is performance. So you'll see that as the page updates, we're processing the rules engine in 50 milliseconds when traditional engines could take 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds for an update. Particularly if you're doing e-commerce directly with your end customer, that performance becomes very, very important, because I'm sure, many of you that would use like Amazon today, if that took several seconds for you to get an answer, you'd probably stop using Amazon. And that's part of the buyer behavior shift that's happening in the market, even in complex B2B transactions that are happening. The other thing is this technology uses a true solving engine technology, and that is essentially the logic behind how the rules engine actually processes the data every time a configuration changes. And one of the key benefits of that is it's a key way that we get this light speed performance. But the other thing a solving engine does is it helps your admin so they don't have to worry about rule precedence, rule ordering, rule hierarchy. The solving engine actually takes care of all of that automatically. And in some cases, when the solving engine starts to run, it'll go into a churn mode and actually converge on a solution. So you don't have to worry about the order of rules affecting changes in behavioral outcomes of the way the configuration model is running. The other thing that's differentiated with this technology, it's a truly headless product configurator. So it's very easy for you to modify the user experience If you want to create a customized UI for e-commerce, you can build that on top of it or have it exactly match your corporate website. We ship the product with a standard branding set that emulates Salesforce Lightning UI components, but you can build any UI on top of it. And all of the APIs that we use for our standard UI are the same APIs that you would use if you were to build a custom UI. And then the last thing I want to highlight here is the administration. So one of the things that we really thought a lot about when we built this technology is making it very easy for your Salesforce admins to maintain it. So you don't need a specialized product set of admins to go in to maintain this. You can use your existing Salesforce admins. And we have a 2-day class that happens a couple times a month where you can sign up and learn the technology and become proficient in it, very quickly. Just a little bit about the team. So our company is a couple of years old, but I think it's important to know the team that we have. So actually Godard is the chairman of our company, and I work very closely with him as CEO. He and I actually founded Big Machines back in 2000, and that was part of originally defining this category of configure, price, quote. And the team that we have, Fazil, who runs products for us, as well as our support desk. He was an early coder of the Drools rules engine when he was a developer many years ago. He grew up as a developer at Big Machines, ran products for us there, worked at Oracle and Workday. And Richard runs our engineering team, who ran engineering at Oracle and Big Machines. And then Vanessa runs our revenue operations for the company, who worked at sold Big Machines, sold SteelBrick, sold Salesforce CPQ, and now heads up revenue for us at Logic. So the team has a lot of experience in building this technology. We understand what it takes to support, an enterprise every day to make sure that it's reliable and fits into their business, very easily with the least amount of maintenance. So before I hand it over to David, just to summarize, for those of you that already run Salesforce CPQ, this slide is kind of like a cliff notes to summarize why you would add Logic to that. And these are kind of 6 of the key reasons we hear from customers in the market today. Performance is a huge benefit, especially if you have more complex models with maybe 50, 100, 1,000 options. Those can be processed very efficiently in the Logic IO configurator. If you need a headless architecture to do omni-channel, if you have lots of rules or lots of complex rules that have dependencies, heavy math calculations, array lookups, maybe you want to reference a table with 1 million records in the middle of a rule function to get the desired outcome and make it data-driven. Those types of complex relationships, we have uniquely suited parts of our rules engine to handle, very efficiently with the least amount of maintenance. Another key reason you would add Logic IO to Salesforce would be if you want to have a different user interface experience and one that's flexible and one that you can extend throughout your organization. And then the last one here touches on the bill of material or provisioning object, where if you have, let's say, hundreds of items or thousands of items that have to go onto a transaction that you've created, and you don't want to show those line items on the quote screen in Salesforce, you can set up a parallel process and run those through the bill of material object in Logic to process those sales orders. So some of these differentiators will make a lot more sense here in a minute when I show you the demo. But with that, I'd like to hand it over to David, and he'll give you some background on Lamons and how they're going to be using Logic IO.
Thank you, Chris. So starting out a little bit about myself, I am a U.S. Army veteran, have experience over the last 20 years in the manufacturing industry, really stretched across aviation support equipment, engineering and construction, oil and gas. My enterprise experience, I've worked in companies ranging from 500 employees up to 74,000. Currently, I am the SVP of IT for Lamons. I am the IT leader for the company and on the senior leadership team. Personal passions, outdoors, hiking, fast cars, and family. But considering what today is probably I should have started out with my wife is my #1 passion. Good thing she's not on this call. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Lamons. Lamons, just last year, we celebrated our 75th anniversary, founded in 1947. We're one of the largest privately held gasket, sealing, bolting, and hose assembly manufacturers in the world. We do have a mission, which is to provide industry-leading safety sealing and attachment solutions through a value quality products, our exceptional service, and a culture of never-ending continuous improvement. We achieve this through our two main manufacturing locations, which are Houston and Denver, and utilizing the other 19 locations that we have located around the world. Next. So with Lamons, once again, we are celebrating our 75th anniversary. It was actually last year in 2022. And we wanted to go through a rebranding initiative, and along with the rebranding initiative, we decided to put together a new strategic plan. And with that, we gave birth to what we call our North Star. The North Star is the beacon for the company, and the symbol off to the right is what I'm referring to. It's actually meaningful to all 704 employees of the company. What that means to us is the letter D with the equal sign is the Roman numeral for 500 million. The L is for Lamons. 2026 is the year that we want to achieve that revenue target. And the little yellow dot is just something that our marketing director threw in there just to color it up a little bit. But with that North Star in that direction, that we realized that it just doesn't come naturally. We're going to have to look at our business processes, look at our tech stack, and see what changes are necessary to help promote that growth. And so therefore that led to a partnership with SalesForce. Manufacturing Cloud came Q1 of last year. And then in Q4 of last year, we signed up for the Marketing Cloud, B2B e-commerce, CPQ Plus. And of course, along with CPQ Plus came Logic.io. And then the project launch, which literally started about 4 weeks ago. We're in the very early stages with that, partnered with our integrator, which is Forefront, partnered with Logic.io, just to put together a seamless solution for us. Next slide. So for us, why Logic.io? Chris talked about some of the stuff already. I'm just going to reiterate it. For Lamons, what was really important was the BOM generation requirement. So we're literally going to be taking a bill of material that is assembled using Logic.io technology, and we're going to be outputting that through our interface to our on-site ERP to feed the job orders that are released onto the shop floor. We also selected Logic.io because of the advanced item configuration capabilities in Logic. It's just far superior to the configurator we have today, where we really don't have many, if any, capabilities. It's more just your traditional item and BOM configurator. And I don't want to say most importantly, but it is fairly important to us. Lastly, the guided selling and the speed of technology. You know, we would hire someone, say, on our inside sales team, and the amount of weeks, if not a month, if not more, to train him or her up to where they're effective on the job and they can work on their own, it was just mind-numbing. So with Logic.io, when we learned, well, geez, we could incorporate really a guided selling, it allows us now to, if we have a turnover of employees or we have a vacancy, whatever have you, it allows us to more quickly fill that position and recognize that individual as a team contributor. So we did have an introductory meeting and requirements gathering when we recognized what Logic.io and all these guys can do, and we had a demo that Logic.io participated in. And that the demo was provided to our senior leadership team. And the demo, what we learned out of that demo, they were really showing what our future processes could be. We learned that, first of all, our future desired process is possible, and that what our future desired process is we want to take our entire sales process, move it from the ERP that it exists in today, and move it up into SalesForce. And it just makes it more of a streamlined process, having that CPQ and B2B up in there along with Manufacturing Cloud. In the demo, we also picked up on that Logic.io clearly understands manufacturing, configurators, of course, but manufacturing processes. It was amazing to see when they put together our demo, just by them traversing through our webpage and seeing what it is that we manufacture, they were able to pick up on high-level processes and terminology that really resonated with us well. Logic.io works very well with other third parties. Forefront, who is our integrator, they worked well with them. SalesForce, of course, is a supporter of Logic.io. You don't always see that type of partnership with third parties like what I experienced during the demo and through the onset of our project. And then lastly, it's just, Logic.io provides superior functionality over Salesforce base, not taking anything away from what Salesforce has done with its CPQ, but it's just the enhancements is really in line with what Lamons needed. So that brings us to the anticipated business benefits. Of course, I already talked about the operational excellence with the front end sales process, business system optimization, simplification, and lastly, the ability to deploy enhanced controls and workflows that up until this point just weren't possible for us. Next slide. And that's it for me. Thank you, Chris.
Cool. Thanks, David. So I would like to take you all through kind of a brief demo, and to tee this up, just to kind of explain the scenario that we're going to go through. We're going to have Sarah, who's an account executive at a generator company, and Sarah is going to input some requirements to size a generator and then actually pick options, configure it, and price it for a particular scenario in here. And if you kind of follow along, what she's going to do is she's going to start off in Salesforce Revenue Cloud. So she'll be logged in to Salesforce. She'll browse some products in Salesforce CPQ. She'll pick a product that's been designated external config using the Logic.io configurator. She'll configure it, pick several complex options. She'll generate a sales bill of material for the quote, and then a manufacturing bill of material for the back office, so they can then produce and ship their engineered product. So I'm going to jump over here to Salesforce, and what I've got is I've already started, just in the interest of time, I've already started with a new quote, and this is Salesforce CPQ. And what I'm going to do is edit the lines for this quote in Salesforce, and I'm going to add some products, and I'm going to select a generator product here. So I'll do a search for a generator set, and I'll select this generator. And now what that did is that launched Logic.io. So this is the Logic.io configurator running with Salesforce CPQ. So just to orient you to the screen, there's a couple of tabs that we'll flip through. These tabs will be dynamic. They'll change based on the way we're answering questions in the configurator. And then on the right, you'll see some sales line items being produced here. So these are actually line items that are being selected using the rules engine in Logic.io. They're being priced from Salesforce and Logic.io in a combination of functionality. And these will eventually end up on the quote. And then over here, I've got essentially some characteristics of the product, and I'm going to start answering some of these. So We're going to say here, this is a standby generator that our customer needs. It's going to be US EPA, off-highway essentially for the emissions compliance. And one of the more complicated aspects of this is I need to establish a load profile for the generator. So in this particular example, I'm going to ask for Logic IO's help to do that. We're going to say that there's 5 potential load household and tooling loads that can go in here. So when I pick household, what that does is it automatically gives me a list of household appliances that I can power with the generator. When I select one, you can see the light speed performance. Logic IO is automatically pulling in typical kilowatt or typical watt loads for the device that I selected, and it's going to start running. It's going to start creating a running total down here at the bottom. So I'll pick another household item. We'll do a dehumidifier, and then I'll pick some tool example here. We'll do an air compressor, and then we'll do battery charger, and then we'll pick the last thing will be that 1-inch drill there. So as I selected those, the rules engine's automatically looking up in the data structures what the typical loads are for those for nominal, max load, surge load, and then it's creating a running total. And these are all standard functions built into this particular option set here, which we call a set at Logic IO. And it's just a way, if you need to instantiate something 1 to n times, you can define a set. So I could have had 2 loads, I could have had 1,000 loads, and you don't have to create all of those options, let's say 1,000 times. You just create it 1 time as a set, and the configurator automatically knows to keep building it out as a kind of a running array in this case. So I haven't answered enough questions yet to start building my sales bill of material yet. So we're going to move down here, and I've got a couple more things that I need to answer to start building my quote line items. So the first thing is, what's the generator model that I want to have? And you can see we have natural gas and diesel generator options here that I could select. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select diesel. So one of the things that's happening is, light speed performance to actually filter down subsequent selections in the configurator. So now I'm only seeing the diesel options because I selected diesel. And what I'm going to do here is say we need a 10 kilowatt example, and I'll size this for max load. And a couple of things happen there. One is my total wattage for the load increased because now I'm sizing it off of the surge load that's totaled. And that went up to 15 kilowatts, but I only selected 10. So I get a first look at some of the messaging that you can build in Logic IO. And we have a whole set of rule functions that are designed just to do messaging. So you can determine where the messages go, what they look like, what type of icons to include in the messages. And this is one of the sort of hard constraint messages. And a couple of things happened. One is the quote button went away. I got this summary icon here that tells me why I can't move forward. And in this case, I've only got one message, but there could be cases where you could have dozens of messages showing up across tabs. And this summary icon is just an easy way to see where those messages might be. So to fix this constraint, we'll go ahead and we'll go up to 40 kilowatts for the power output of the generator. And a couple of things happened when I selected that. So I got a first look at my sales bill of materials. So this is kind of the bundle of components that are recommended based on the way I've started answering the questions in here. And then you can see that the configurator is giving me some feedback here. In this case, it's not a warning, it's just informational, saying that based on the way I've selected the power output, this is the generator frame size that it's recommending. A couple of other things happened. It automatically set an emissions compliance criteria here, and then selected some other emissions criteria factors that go in this. And then also set some options for temperature rise, frequency, maximum ambient temperature. And you can see down below here, I have not selected an alternator or an alternator part number. And the reason for that is I haven't told it the voltage yet that we're going to run at. So if I select 480 here, you can see that immediately I got an alternator selection and an alternator part number for that, and it updated my sales bill of material. If I scroll back up to the top here, you can see a couple more tabs showed up that were dynamic based on the way I've been answering options in here. So you can really guide the user along in a complex configuration scenario. The next thing that showed up was my engine tab. And in here, I've got couple of different engine options. And if I select all of these, Logic IO gives me a really nice side-by-side comparison. So I can see why a particular engine might be suitable for an application. And then I got a new type of message that showed up here, which is sort of a soft warning that says the QS, B5, G6 is really recommended for heavy duty applications versus the base engine G5, which is a $0 adder to the configurator. So I'll pull that out and we'll go with the base engine in this particular example. If I go over the fuel system tab, Logic IO has automatically figured out the fuel consumption per hour at the load point that I've entered in the system. So there's a little bit of math calculations running behind the scenes here to do the sizing. And what I can do is select a runtime. So just to give me an idea, if I run for 48 hours, here's the fuel consumption that would come up, and it automatically sized the tank and then the overall tank height that goes with that. So just some automatic recommendations that are happening. And then another thing showed up here, which is interesting, which is something that we call a pick list extension. And that's really just a fancy way of giving your customer a large list of products that they can pick to add to their configuration. And there's some intelligence built in here. So this product list showed up automatically. And based on the configuration questions I've already answered, the product list is dynamic. And then there's rules that run inside the product list. So this is really handy if you have situations where you want to do guided selling, like I've shown you so far in this example, but at the same time, you want to mix in with some intelligent product picking along the way. So just checking a bunch of SKUs, like for add-ons, ancillary products, aftermarket spare parts kits. You can easily do that with this simple product picking scenario, but still add intelligence to it. So for example, based on, I'm getting some messaging here. So based on the way the configurator has been answered so far, as well as the product pick list, I get some messages around the low-level fuel switch that's recommended. And then I also get a warning here that an electrical gauge cannot be selected with a mechanical, which makes sense. You can't have two fuel gauges. And then if I do select that, I can actually get a warning in here. So I'll deselect that and then move on to my last tab here in the scenario. We're almost done configuring our generator for this particular customer. What I'll do is upgrade the support package to a gold package. So this involves a monthly service call or generator checkup, as well as phone support. And then I can add, in this particular example, some additional support hours to go with that. And Logic IO automatically calculates the total hours and then updates the pricing here real time. So you can pull the product prices from SalesForce and then do additional math on those in Logic IO if you'd like to further enhance if you've got like a complicated pricing scenario here for the quote line items. So with this, the last thing I'll do, I've got a green check, which means no more constraints showing up. So I've got a valid configuration. Here, the total generator skid is 12,000. So we've totaled out the pricing. And these are the items that will go on the quote screen. And what I want to do is to show you behind the scenes an example here. This is actually the manufacturing bill of material. Now, typically you wouldn't show this in a given sales scenario that I'm doing right now, but this is just to show you what's happening behind the scenes. So I went from those, 10 or 12 line items up to over 1,200 line items. And this is actually the manufacturing bill of material. So now we're down to the piece part components, screws, fasteners, O-rings, et cetera. These are all the components needed to actually build the equipment when it's manufactured, when the actual generator's manufactured. You can see there's 1,200 line items. So it gives you an idea of the scale of the system. The performance, differences are negligible even with lots of line items. So what I'm going to do is take these quote line items. I'm going to hit the quote button. And then for those of you that already run SalesForce CPQ, you'll recognize this screen. So this is everything that's, naturally, standard setup of SalesForce CPQ, my quote screen, where I can then do my, generate my proposal from here, do additional discounting, send this project for approval inside of SalesForce. and then complete everything else downstream just as a standard SalesForce CPQ scenario. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how the product works in a typical, manufacturing setting inside of SalesForce. So with that, I think we have a few minutes left, Emma, so we'll open it up for questions. And thanks again for everyone for joining the webinar today.